Welcome to episode 6 of Maddie's Joy, an Angelman Journey. I am your host, Adam Birchmeyer. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about an article shared by Julian Gary, Why Self-Care is Essential to Parenting, and we'll be talking about the caregiver burnout. All right, we have made it to episode 6 already of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Last week's podcast, I actually got some fantastic responses. Had a lot of people actually reach out to me directly. And so I thought that I would actually keep the trend going. I found this article of Julian Gary. Her article, Why Self-Care is Essential to Parenting, and it just really struck a chord with me. So I figured I should share this with you. I will have the article name and the author in the show notes below. And then I also shared the article on Twitter. So if you follow us on Twitter, you can actually just click right there on the article. But she starts out by talking about caregiver burnout. I think this is something that all special needs parents will experience in their lifetime. And there are steps and ways to try to avoid caregiver burnout. But some of the symptoms include anxiety, depression, fatigue, insomnia, and then it can lead to marital problems. For me personally, insomnia is something that I've actually been dealing with for the past, I would say, about 3 weeks. I found myself, especially on the weekends, I'd be up till 3, 4 in the morning, and Maddie's not always awake, but I am. And I wasn't really doing anything special. I just couldn't sleep. I would try to lay down, and then I would toss and turn. Currently taking some medication for that to try to um, you know, regulate my circadian rhythm again. But it's something that I noticed and something that was actually quite scary because I was fatigued. I just couldn't shut my mind off. So I just kind of had to do like a self-diagnosis and really think, okay, is this normal for me? Which it isn't. So started taking some medication, which I feel guilty because if Maddie's up in the middle of the night, I'm knocked out cold, so Nicole has to take over. So really balancing, taking care of myself and making sure that my partner is taken care of as well. Something that I found interesting is last week I talked about building a community, and having a community around you can actually help negate some of these things. So studies have shown that having a good solid group around you can actually help lower blood pressure, reduce your risk of depressions, and studies have even shown that it can lower your BMI, which is important for your overall health. Not saying that it will, but those are just some things that building a strong community support can actually help you with. And in this article, they actually shared a British study, and it studied parents of children with autism or ADHD. And in these parents, they actually had significantly higher levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And then they found a biomarker called CRP was elevated. And that's actually linked to colorectal cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. So you need to take time for yourself and you need to learn to accept your limits. We have a ton of super moms in our community. I'm not discounting us dads, but there are so many strong women in our Angelman syndrome community that fight tooth and nail for their children, which they should, but just recognize that it's okay not to be able to do it all. If you have a partner, ask them for help. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and you don't have to have all the answers right away, even though I know that you want them, and believe me, I fall into that category as well, where I just want to know how to best parent my child, and it's a learning process. So there's four things that you need to focus on in order to make sure that you're of sound mind, sound body, and able to be there for your child. Number one is sleep. I know we have Angelman children, so sleep is always a fight, but you need to get your proper sleep at night. You need to hydrate. You need regular exercise, and I'm not trying to say go to the gym every single day. Go for a walk. Make sure that you are staying active. And I know that this sounds counterproductive, but actually time away from your children to kind of reset and recharge your batteries, because let's face it, we're all facing exhaustion, and some of us feel isolated. Some of our children can have behavioral issues. We can feel cut off from family, and that sense of loneliness can increase stress levels. You know, feeling like nobody understands us can heighten that sense of stress that we feel, because we feel like we're in it all alone. In the article, they actually gave an example of a family, and the child in question had an extreme mental illness, that they actually had to put the child in a group home at the age of 20 years old. And the rest of the family was actually diagnosed with PTSD because they were just on pins and needles all the time. They were constantly on guard, and they felt like they couldn't disconnect from the situation. And they were actually diagnosed with PTSD, which maybe some of us in the community, a PTSD diagnosis is feasible. We're so focused on care for our children that we don't realize that there's actually options out there for us. If you haven't looked into it yet, look for respite care options in your community. You might be able to have somebody come into your home so you can take a break. And if respite care is not something that you are interested in, you still need that village around you, but you need to ask for help. And if you don't feel comfortable asking them to someone to watch your child, ask for smaller tasks. What are those little things that you might have to run out, and it's becomes an all day thing because you have to pack this, pack that? Ask somebody for help. So, ask them to pick up a few groceries for you. And then network with other special needs parents. That's one thing that I love about this community is you go on the Facebook pages and there's always somebody there to help answer your question. And it doesn't feel so isolated. And I always like to tip my cap to those parents that came before we joined the community, parents of older Angelman children. You guys have been there, you guys have done that, and you guys are such a wealth of resources for me and my family. I just can't thank you enough. But as a special needs parent, you still need to get out and about. The article actually states that you should do an assessment on your social life, and you should ask yourself 4 questions. These 4 questions are: what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing as a couple to support each other? When is the last time you had a date night? And when did you last spend time with friends? Ask yourself those 4 questions. And some suggestions that they had was find a support group of like-minded individuals. Obviously, the Angelman Facebook page is a great resource. It's a great way to connect with people. I hope those of you who went to the Fast Gala had an amazing time. And those support groups are great, but they're still about your children. So the article actually suggests that you spend time with friends that have that's not connected with your child. Obviously, if they're your friends, they're going to know about your child. But sometimes you just need to get away from the Angelman conversation. Believe me, I eat, sleep, and dream about Angelman syndrome, but I still take time away from this. I mentioned on the last podcast, I actually play in an over 30 soccer league. And for that 1 hour, once a week, I can just kind of put everything in the back of my mind and just be a person again. I don't have to be an advocate. I don't have to be a fighter for my child. I can just relax and enjoy things and enjoy something that I enjoy. So take time out for the things that you enjoy as well, whether that's reading, writing, working out, running, whatever that thing that you love is, make sure that you're taking time to enjoy those things. Lastly, the article suggests to nurture your marriage. Obviously, this isn't a suggestion. This is something that you should do. But let's be real. Divorce rates are as high as 85% for special needs parents, and it really depends on the source. And it doesn't have you don't have to fall into that statistic because it's still your relationship. But find the little time if you can't go out. Do an in-home date night. Nicole and I actually put Maddie to bed a couple weekends ago, opened up a bottle of wine, and just sat and watched a movie and got to enjoy time with each other. Each and every single day, you should be carving out time to ask your significant other about how they're doing emotionally, how their day was, their highlights and their lowlights. And when you're doing this, this isn't a planning session. This isn't, okay, what's the next appointment? What do we need to do next? What specialists do we need to contact? Make sure that you keep this time just about you and your partner. Something interesting that I never thought about, but the article highlighted couples that disagree about treatment options and what's considered normal behavior. And they broke them down into information seekers and information deniers. And this was me 100%. I was an information denier when we were going through the process of getting diagnosed. I've mentioned before, Maddie was diagnosed with COVID when she was 5 months old, and then post-COVID pneumonia. And I had it in my head that my child was completely fine. So when the doctors would bring up microcephaly, or they would bring up Rett syndrome, or even the mention of Angelman syndrome, the first thing that my wife did was actually go and seek information, and I would kind of cringe because that wasn't going to be my daughter. My daughter was fine, and we can run all these tests, but they're not going to show anything because she's going to be all right. And really, I think not only was I in denial, but I was actually scared, and that was really the cause of me kind of pulling away, because I was terrified of what those what any one of those diagnoses would mean. So try to see the issue from the other person's perspective as well. I understood my wife wanting to go out and seek the information. I thought that she was wasting her time, but she wanted to be prepared. And me, I took more of a wait and see approach. Like I said, I was terrified of what a diagnosis would mean. Fast forward now, I know that even though we have a diagnosis, it hasn't really changed my child. She's an amazing little girl. And I'm so glad that I found the Angelman syndrome community. I'm so glad that I landed here because you have all been such a great support to me. Thank you so much for listening to episode 6 of the Maddie's Joy podcast. You can contact us through email, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I loved hearing some of your responses from last week. So please like, subscribe, comment, and let me know what you guys want to hear. This podcast today was actually spurred from last week because I got such tremendous response from people who wanted to hear more. And by no means am I an expert. I'm going through the same battles that you are. I'm here to share my experience. If you want to come onto the podcast and share your experience, I'm more than happy to have you on here. But I'm more than willing to take any suggestions. If you want to come on the podcast, feel free to come on the podcast and share your child's story, share your family's story. But most of all, just thank you so much for listening. And until next time, have a wonderful day.